When Lucas handed me the breakup fee for the 19th time, I agreed. The girl he adored was clamoring for a title and couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't wait either. I was pregnant, and the child wasn't his. After signing the agreement, I took a quick photo and sent it to Lucas. It's signed. Should I have Jean come pick it up? 20 minutes passed quietly. Lucas's chat window was as silent as if it had died. Just as I was considering whether to call a local courier, I saw Lucas standing at the door, breathing heavily. He actually came in person. Of course. His little lover had been making a scene for half a year, demanding a title. It seemed he was really anxious. Go ahead, what tricks do you want to play this time? The things that should be given to you, I haven't missed a single one, he replied coldly, with a hint of impatience. 3 years ago, Lucas had given me a wedding. Since then, I became his nominal Mrs. Lucas. I accompanied him from a state of poverty to success. But for the past 6 months, he had been contemplating how to get rid of me, just to make room for that little canary. The property division agreement had already gone through 19 versions. Previously, I had been dissatisfied. This time, I signed it obediently, but he grew suspicious instead. I chuckled softly and handed the agreement to him for a look. He opened it warily, and when he saw that I had indeed signed my name, his expression darkened. Sophia, you really agreed? I looked at him strangely. He used to say he hated it when I acted childish and got jealous for no reason. Now that I was quiet and complied with his wish to take the money and leave, how come he seemed even less happy? Did he want to see me crying and begging him to stay? I smiled. Isn't this good? You can marry Emily openly now, and I can replan my life. This agreement included houses, cars, and shares in the company, everything he could give me. He was certainly putting in a lot. I was open to accepting it all. After all, I was the one who had been nameless through all these years with him. Who would willingly let their past toil be enjoyed by others? Now it was fine. With the wealth I had earned over the years, combined with what he was giving me starting tomorrow, I could travel the world and live comfortably for the rest of my life. Although love was gone, thankfully I still had plenty of money. Upon hearing my words, Lucas's expression became complex, and he seemed hesitant to speak. At that moment, a soft, delicate voice interrupted us. Sophia, thank you for allowing us to be together. Emily, the little canary that Lucas adored. She was a golden phoenix flying out of the hills. With an ordinary university degree, it was already impressive that she got into the competitive Lucas group. In just 3 months, she became Lucas's secretary in the president's office. She really worked hard at seducing Lucas. Lucas claimed she was pure and kind, always worried I might bully her. But what kind of innocent and kind person would sleep with a married man and send photos of their bed to his wife? I used to be unable to see things clearly. I cried and caused a scene. I even got so angry once that I exposed them online. The next day, however, all traces of that post had disappeared. Lucas was always quick and decisive in his methods. How ironic that one day, he would use those very tactics on me. After all this turmoil, I had grown weary. I looked at the two of them with a half-smile, not wanting to say another word. You got the agreement, aren't you leaving? I was giving them the cold shoulder. This villa was under my name. Since Lucas started seeing his mistress frequently, he rarely returned here. I wanted to disinfect the whole place the moment they stayed for even a second longer. Lucas's face darkened. Sophia, playing hard to get won't work on me. Since you dared to sign, don't regret it. With that, he took Emily and headed for the door. Wait. I called out to Lucas. He turned back to look at me with an expression that seemed to say, I knew it. He probably thought I couldn't bear to part with him. But I was just reminding him, don't forget to transfer the funds soon, and, quickly transfer the real estate to me. His expression blanked for a moment, then he gritted his teeth. You really are anxious. Anxious? How could I not be? I was pregnant, and it wasn't his. If I didn't part ways with him soon, things wouldn't end well. I had scheduled a prenatal checkup. I didn't expect to run into Lucas and Emily at the hospital. He was carefully holding her hand. Emily was chattering away, and he listened patiently, his eyes filled with warmth and affection. They were so intimate, it felt like there was no room for a third person. Memories surged. Not long ago, he had also treasured me like this. It had been too long. The last time he looked at me that way was when I had a miscarriage. At that time, I was 4 months pregnant. He had his first mistress outside. She was a fearless girl who stormed into my life, demanding I give her space. I cursed her for being shameless, but she retorted that it was the unloved ones who were the mistresses. Perhaps due to a severe blow to her pride, she pushed me hard just like that. The child was gone. I was covered in blood and sent into the operating room. When I woke up again, the first thing I saw was Lucas, who looked full of guilt. His eyes were filled with remorse as he tightly held my hand, crying and choking on his words. "I'm sorry, Sophia. I'm the bastard. Go ahead and hit me, I'm sorry." I slapped him hard, and he didn't dodge, just took it. Once I was tired of hitting him, he finally spoke hesitantly. "Just this once, Sophia, please give me a chance to make it up to you. We can still have children." He sent that girl away and turned back into the considerate lover he once was. Unfortunately, it lasted only for a brief 6 months. After that, a new girl appeared by his side. Then the girls kept changing one after another. Each young, tender face I barely recognized before they were replaced. Emily was the one who stayed by his side the longest. It was indeed a bit awkward to run into them at the obstetrics and gynecology department. I turned to leave. To my surprise, I was stopped by Emily's voice. "Sophia, what a coincidence." She was hanging on to Lucas like a large ornament, her face flushed and looking a bit shy. "I'm pregnant and here to see the doctor." I looked at her performance with a blank expression. When Lucas saw the appointment slip in my hand, his brow furrowed. "What are you here for?" I smiled coldly. "Mr. Lucas, it's best not to be too curious about your ex-wife's privacy in front of your new lover." He seemed a bit irritated and actually pushed Emily aside, gripping my wrist. "Sophia, I'm your man." I stared at him, my tone inevitably laced with mockery. "My man? Mr. Lucas, are you sure? Although we had a wedding, I've always been unmarried in the marriage registration system." Lucas was momentarily stunned, as if he suddenly remembered something, his expression darkening. Yes, that wedding had been so romantic and grand. In the eyes of outsiders, I was his only Mrs. Lucas. Especially with the complexities of our business and shared distribution over the years. But who knew? In fact, we had never gone to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Every time I urged Lucas to get the marriage certificate with me, he was either busy with a meeting or on a business trip abroad. His time was always so precious. So precious that he hadn't been able to spare half an hour for 3 whole years to accompany me to get a marriage certificate. Yet when it came time for our breakup, we tore at each other over the issues of money and power, making it public knowledge. My wrist was hurting from his grip, yet he refused to loosen it. Fortunately, not long after, the call number announced my name. "Please patient Sophia to consultation room number 5. Only then did Lucas reluctantly release my hand. I immediately passed him and Emily, entered the consultation room, and locked the door behind me, completely ignoring Lucas's darkened expression. After the doctor carefully reviewed my examination report, he gave me a few instructions and reminded me to bring the child's father next time. "He's dead." Those words hit like thunder, and the doctor, who had been focused on writing the case notes, quickly looked up, his eyes filled with sympathy. He switched to a comforting tone, expressing his condolences. I cooperatively showed a sorrowful expression. Perhaps due to the early stage of my pregnancy, I felt quite sleepy. After returning from the hospital, I had been sleeping the whole time. In my dazed state, I had many dreams. At first, it was when I had just graduated from university, right when Lucas's family went bankrupt, and he was left homeless. We squeezed into a tiny rental apartment, and he held me close, wrapping me in his down jacket, resting it against his heart. "Sophia, when I have money, I'll make sure you never suffer again. I'll hire at least 5 people, one to cook for you, one to do the laundry, one to make the bed." The sound of his vigorous heartbeat was in my ears. His sweet words flushed my face with warmth, and I naively believed that his love could overcome any difficulty. Later, he really did rise again, achieving success. But more people started to surround him. Those people came and went, just like the love that Lucas couldn't hold on to. As the dream progressed, it turned into a scene of chaos, with broken porcelain pieces scattered everywhere, my feet bleeding as I broke down crying. He stood by, indifferent, watching me go mad, and said nonchalantly, "Sophia, you really look terrible like this." In that moment, I looked at him. The person I had once loved so deeply in my youth seemed to suddenly rot away. When I woke up, the sky was already darkening. I was dazed and prepared to get up. A sudden voice startled me. "I heard you're pregnant with my child and going around spreading rumors that I'm dead." I jumped, looking towards the sound. There stood a man in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, looking at me, the moonlight casting a silvery glow on his dark suit. The room was unlit, and he was hidden in the darkness. If he hadn't spoken, I wouldn't have noticed him. "William, are you trying to scare someone to death? You're going too far." William found my words amusing. He walked to the bedside and pulled me into his embrace. His warm body heat seeped through the thin nightgown, and his hand gently caressed my lower back. When he spoke again, his tone was full of helplessness. "Who's being excessive, Sophia? First, you slept with me and ran off, and now you want to take my child and run too?" William guessed correctly. My plan was to take the child and find a small town to settle down in, far away from Lucas. And far away from William. After all, our beginning was far from glorious 3 months ago, on my birthday. Lucas proactively said, "Before we part, let me accompany you for one last birthday celebration. It's for good luck, let's part on good terms." He had booked a restaurant early on. The table by the window offered a panoramic view of the night scenery. He came to pick me up, as if nothing had changed between us. He presented me with a cake and personally placed the lit candles. "Make a wish." At his urging, I reluctantly closed my eyes, my emotions tangled as I silently recited, "My wishes." It took about 10 seconds. When I opened my eyes again, I stared blankly at the empty seat across from me. Lucas was nowhere to be found. I waited for quite a while, but he didn't return. Finally, a waiter approached me and said, "Mr. Lucas just took a call and left. He instructed me to tell you that you can finish your meal and leave directly. He's covered all the expenses for today." I watched the candles on the cake burn out, the cream slowly collapsing. The words "Happy Birthday" turned into ugly red smudges. Finally, I laughed mockingly. After leaving the restaurant, I took a taxi to the harbor. When we were broke and couldn't afford to travel elsewhere, Lucas always liked to take me for walks by the harbor. He used to say that even if we couldn't see fresh scenery, it was nice to feel the sea breeze. But the sea was still the same sea, and people had long since changed. I wandered aimlessly for a long time until someone nearby exclaimed, "Oh my God, this is so romantic." Following their gaze, I looked up at the night sky over the sea, where a dark canvas was adorned with countless flashing drone lights, forming romantic cursive letters, "Emily, I love you." A few seconds later, the night sky burst into countless flowers. Brilliant, beautiful. Passers-by marveled, "Wow, which rich kid is confessing today?" Sigh, another day of being a background NPC. I almost self-harmingly opened my social media. Sure enough, I saw Emily's show-off post. True love means that no matter what time it is, as long as I say I miss him, he can give me a confession. The accompanying photo was of the drone proposal. When a person's heart is utterly dead, they might become indistinguishable from a madman. I bought a lot of alcohol to drink. There were too many people by the seaside. Lucas and Emily were together, surrounded by unaware onlookers, completely oblivious to my presence. I watched them for a long, long time. Until I realized that my side was already filled with empty bottles, and my vision began to blur. I realized that continuing to drink was not a good idea, so I stood up and staggered away. After finally escaping the noisy harbor, I walked along the road and bumped into someone. "Be careful." He held my hand to steady me. I straightened up and saw who it was. William, a big shot in the Shanghai Circle, heir to the William Group. Over the years, I had some dealings with him due to business investments. I could say that 2/3 of my wealth had been earned thanks to this big tree. He was completely different from Lucas, with hardly any women around him. People in the circle joked about whether he was gay. He never denied it. Sophia? He steadied me, frowning. How did you drink so much? He smelled quite nice, very clean. Unlike Lucas, who always had Emily's perfume on him. William, they all say you like men. Is it true? I asked out of the blue. My tongue was a bit numb, probably due to the alcohol. William was taken aback for a moment, then sighed helplessly as he carefully helped me into his Rolls-Royce. Maybe it was because he looked very much to my liking. Maybe the alcohol dulled my rationality. Or perhaps, I just wanted to indirectly get back at Lucas. I quietly leaned closer to William and proactively kissed him on the cheek. He turned his head, looking at me in shock. In that instant, his pupils shook. His pale skin flushed with a slight pink. The next second, emboldened, I boldly straddled him. William, do you want to try something with me? I was too close, my lips brushed against his earlobe. So soft. I decided to kiss him. His ear was slightly warm. A voice rang above me, a bit hoarse, Sophia, wake up. I laughed, I'm awake. I know you men all like young and beautiful ones. Just a word and you can send a woman off. The desire surged within me, and I subconsciously wanted to lean toward a cooler place. He frowned, his gaze unclear. I tilted my head again to kiss him. This time, he didn't dodge. His lips were icy, with a refreshing mint scent. Very pleasant. As the kiss became fuzzy, I was nearly breathless. Yet he held the back of my head with one hand and gripped my waist with the other, forcing me to continue. The partition in the car rose at the right moment, completely enclosing us in a sealed space. He finally released me, his voice even hoarser than before, Sophia. I don't like men. Nor do I like young ones. Huh? His reaction time was quite slow. We had kissed, so why say that? The alcohol hadn't made me black out, but my mind was indeed a bit chaotic. Before I could figure it out, William had already started the car. Not long after, we arrived at our destination. William lifted me from the back seat in a horizontal position. He carried me through the living room of the villa, hurried up the stairs into the bedroom, and carefully placed me on the bed. He stood at the edge of the bed, looking down at me. My eyes fixated on his lips, the ones I had just kissed, moist and glistening. They were slightly swollen, a rosy hue. My gaze drifted down to the collar of his shirt, where 2 buttons had been undone. His collarbone was exposed, making him look like a seductive male sprite. He curved his lips and, holding my hand, slipped it beneath the hem of his shirt. Sophia, do you want it? Yes. Satisfied with my response, William leaned down and kissed me. Unlike the previous kisses, this one was deep and heavy, as if he wanted to express his intense possessiveness. The heated kiss traveled downward. Sophia, do you like it? My face felt like it was on fire as I clung tightly to William. Initially, I bit my lip, refusing to answer. But ultimately, I succumbed to William's advances. I buried my face in his neck and whimpered, I like it. He kissed me with satisfaction. Eventually, I drifted into a deep sleep in his embrace. When I woke up the next day, he was already gone. I understood what this meant. He must be someone who dislikes complications. Just as well, I disliked complications too. Since he had left, I naturally had to pretend that nothing had happened. So, I slipped away and also blocked all his contact information, cutting ties cleanly to avoid any awkwardness. As for business dealings, I would let my subordinates handle them from now on. We could keep things strictly professional. After that, I hadn't seen William again. It wasn't until a few days ago, when my period was delayed, that I suddenly remembered I hadn't taken any contraceptive pills after that encounter. I secretly bought a pregnancy test. I ended up testing 5 times in a row, and each time there were 2 lines. I was filled with questions. After my last miscarriage, The doctor had said it would be difficult for me to conceive again if I ever wanted to. This what happened to that difficulty? How did William get me pregnant in one go? I was confused. Logically, William had a right to know. But recalling his attitude that day, I was unsure. To be on the safe side, I said nothing and prepared to quickly break up with Lucas, making proper arrangements for my future and that of the child. Unfortunately, before I could make arrangements, William came looking for me. Sophia, why did you block me? His lips were close to my ear, his voice cool, yet his warm breath spilled from his lips. You didn't regret it after sleeping with me, did you? His attitude left me a bit stunned. I hadn't expected him to care so much about my blocking him. To avoid further misunderstandings, I decided to clarify, William, we're both adults. That night, I initiated things, so I understood I would take responsibility for the consequences. You can check with the hospital, you should know. I definitely plan to keep the baby. I have money and can handle raising the child myself without causing you any trouble. If you're really concerned, we can sign a confidentiality agreement. William, who had been kissing my earlobe, suddenly froze, his voice dropping even lower. You'll handle it yourself? What if the child asks about their father? What if they want to see their father's photo? I had thought this through. I would tell the child that their dad has died. The photo can be AI generated, and as for the cause of death, I'll say it was a car accident. If you're not satisfied, you can come up with a more dignified reason for my death. Of course, if you want to see the kid later, that's fine. Just have them call you Uncle. William first frowned, and upon hearing the last part, he was actually so annoyed that he laughed. Call me Uncle, Sophia, what do you think I am to you? I was momentarily taken aback, unsure of what he meant. Why wasn't he satisfied when I had already provided him with an escape route? William, I just didn't want to trouble you too much. After all, you left quite decisively that day. As I spoke, I observed William's expression, considering other possibilities. He couldn't have changed his mind upon discovering I was pregnant, wanting to fight me for custody, could he? William took several deep breaths before finally speaking resignedly. I didn't think you were a trouble. I was slightly stunned. In my heart, a new absurd guess began to take shape. William looked deeply into my eyes, seriously explaining, that day, a project in my French branch ran into issues, and I had to rush over to handle it. I left you a note asking you to wait for me to come back. So, you didn't see anything? A note? I certainly hadn't seen one. In this age of advanced technology, who writes notes anymore? Besides, I was too embarrassed to even look around. I just wanted to escape as soon as possible. William continued to accuse. When I finally wanted to contact you again, I found that you had blocked all my contact information. Sophia, do you see me as something shameful? I awkwardly smiled. That's a bit extreme. But we can't just sleep together and then wake up to get married, right? He lowered his eyes and retorted, why not? I suddenly widened my eyes, incredulous. Are you serious? William, do you really like kids that much? William's gaze deepened, and after staring at me for a long time, he spoke with a slightly lazy tone. Just consider it as me liking kids. Of course, I did not agree to William's proposition. That was too ridiculous. From being deeply attached to each other to growing tired of one another, Lucas and I tangled for so many years without a perfect ending. I didn't want to casually jump into another entangled situation. William didn't force me, he just stared at me as I added his contact information back. He said I must notify him whenever I go for a prenatal checkup. I frowned. Is that really necessary? I couldn't tell if it was my imagination, but there seemed to be a gritted teeth feeling in his smile. Didn't you say I like kids? How could someone who likes kids let you go alone for a prenatal checkup? Fine. I respected his rights as the biological father. Besides, he was also a cash cow in my business. I had to give him some face. After that, William began to care about my eating, clothing, and dietary needs and even started buying baby supplies. Once, while on a business trip to Europe, he personally brought back a masterfully crafted baby crib stuffed with various diapers and baby formula. He really seemed to look forward to the baby's arrival. Slowly, over time, I grew accustomed to it, until half a month later at the auction. When William and I entered together, we ran into Lucas. Emily was holding Lucas's arm, her eyes unable to hide her pride. After not seeing each other for a long time, Lucas paused for a moment when he saw me standing next to William. He opened his mouth, seemingly wanting to say something to me. But Emily didn't give him that chance. "Darling, I'm a bit tired. Can you accompany me to sit over there?" As she left, she didn't forget to turn back and give me a mocking smile. I ignored her. After all, I was pregnant and needed to stay as far away as possible from these sources of disgust. At this auction, the exhibits were quite ordinary, and I was lackluster until I spotted a necklace. The piece was a beautiful design I had loved for many years but had never been able to buy. The starting price was 800,000. I raised my paddle first. Emily, not willing to back down, immediately followed suit. 1 million. 1,500,000. Finally, it was Lucas who raised his paddle. 3 million. He knew I had wanted this necklace for a long time, yet he still insisted on competing with me, deliberately giving it to Emily. I glanced in their direction and happened to catch Emily's triumphant expression. I knew that Emily might not like it that much. She simply didn't want to see me happy. 3 million, first time. 3 million, second time. I didn't raise my paddle again. William squeezed my hand, wanting to raise the price. 500. Before he could finish, I hurriedly pressed down on him. 5 what? Are you crazy? He looked a bit innocent. 5 million isn't expensive. Don't you like it a lot? I scoffed. How is it not expensive? You just haven't been poor before. Only someone who has truly been poor knows that 5 million is incredibly expensive. When someone is in dire straits, let alone 5 million, they might even fight for $500. But this kind of reasoning would likely be hard for the oblivious William to understand. I shook my head. Let it go. I don't want something that loses money. Lucas's 3 million has already far exceeded the necklace's value. If he wants to be the fool, let him. After all, he had already signed the property division agreement, so the money he spent now was all from his own share. 3 million wasn't much, but it added up over time. I hoped he would spend himself into poverty. 3 million, third time, sold. The auction hammer fell, signifying the conclusion. Afterward, the crowd flowed out. Emily deliberately walked over to me, starting off with a boast. "Sophia, are you upset? It's all Lucas's fault. He saw I liked it and just ignored it. I'll let you have a look." Lucas, standing beside her, silently watched this scene. He did pamper Emily, allowing her to dance in front of me time and again. I slightly curled my lips. "No need, I don't like it that much. If you like it, take it. After all, what good can the things you like be?" I glanced pointedly at Lucas beside her. Lucas's face visibly darkened, angrily saying, "Sophia, how have you become like this? It's just a necklace. Is it worth being so sharp-tongued? I can always buy you one later." I paused, then looked at him steadily. "No need. As you said, it's just a necklace. I'm not lacking." Lucas choked for a moment, as if finally remembering something. I was a jewelry designer. The first pot of gold he earned when he started his company was thanks to me selling my design rights, which had brought him $1 million. At that time, with tears in his eyes, he hugged me, promising to buy me lots and lots of jewelry in the future. Unfortunately, in the end, he only gave me an ordinary ring. I had been his girlfriend for 4 years and his wife for 3 years. He used a tiny diamond to take away my most precious 7 years. Promises are only sincere the moment they are spoken. And sincerity can change in an instant. In the end, love means taking a long, difficult journey, relying solely on one's conscience. Now he has his company, and I have my own career. My jewelry design brand is already world-renowned. Whatever I want, I can buy myself. I no longer need him. Lucas seemed to recall the past, lost in thought. When he looked at me again, there was a hint of guilt and longing in his gaze. At that moment, William's tall figure suddenly intervened, completely blocking Lucas's view of me. His voice was lazy yet filled with mockery. "Mr. Lucas, it's been years, and your taste has changed. Now you drink green tea." As he said green tea, William casually glanced at Emily. Emily managed to suppress her anger, but her expression was so contorted it was almost unrecognizable. I couldn't be bothered to watch any longer. "William, let's go." The fact that I called his name in public seemed to please William. He smiled slightly. I thought everything would end there, and it would finally be peaceful. But unexpectedly, Lucas suddenly had a change of heart. I had the habit of putting my phone on silent while I slept. When I woke up that day, the screen showed more than 30 missed calls and over 99 WeChat messages, all from Lucas. "Sophia, let's talk. I'm coming to find you. No one's home. Where are you? Last time you went to the obstetrics and gynecology department, what were you checking for? Are you pregnant? If you are pregnant, I can promise not to separate." You're not replying, so I'll just wait at the door for you. "Sophia, why weren't you home all night? Why did you even fire the maid?" Because I had already moved out. That house held memories of his life, and I couldn't stand living there, so I sold it. When William found out, as the father of the child, he kindly offered me a villa on an island and even arranged for a private doctor and caregiver. The island was beautiful, with a pleasant climate, especially suitable for pregnancy. I didn't refuse. Who would be foolish enough to refuse such an offer? Since William wanted to enjoy the rights of being a father, he naturally had to make some sacrifices. This is called a fair exchange. Between William and me, we gradually developed this kind of understanding. As for Lucas, according to the agreement, he still had a lot of property that hadn't been transferred to me yet. There was no way he could backtrack now. I immediately called him back. Lucas's voice came through the receiver, weary and a bit hoarse. "Sophia, I asked the previous maids. They mentioned noticing you taking medications to support the pregnancy. If that's true, we can hold off on separating." I suddenly lost my patience. When a person is down on their luck, even taking medicine can get reported by the maid. Fortunately, I understood that no secret could stay hidden forever and had mentally prepared myself. Before Lucas could finish, I calmly interrupted him. "I am pregnant." "But Lucas, who says the child is yours?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear Lucas's rapid breathing. After a long while, he coldly retorted, "Sophia, what do you mean?" When Lucas finally traced me down, I was playing with Egg Yolk, a small yellow dog William had adopted for me to keep me company. It was gentle and affectionate, always lying by my feet in the sun. When Lucas saw me, he froze. "You're really here. If I remember correctly, the property here should be under the William family's name." He stared intently at my belly, as if trying to bore a hole through it. "When exactly did this happen?" I tilted my head and smiled, telling him, "Do you remember my birthday?" "The night you left halfway through to confess to Emily using a drone." Lucas widened his eyes in disbelief as he looked at me. Finally, he trembled and said, "Sophia, we haven't separated yet, and you've already put a green hat on me?" In his eyes, it seemed I was the one who had made a mistake, the one who deserved blame for the betrayal. I couldn't help but laugh mockingly and retorted, "What about those years when your lovers changed one after another? Did you think of me when you were rolling around with Emily and making her pregnant?" He knew he was in the wrong and couldn't argue back. After standing there for a while, he reluctantly said, "Sophia, if you terminate the pregnancy, we won't quarrel. I'll go with you to the Civil Affairs Bureau to get our marriage certificate. Let's live well from now on, okay?" I was so angry I laughed, staring unblinkingly into his eyes. "Terminate? Do you think that's possible? I've had a miscarriage before. The doctor said it would be very difficult for me to have children again. Do you remember why I miscarried in the first place? What right do you have to decide the fate of my child?" He swayed, pain flickering in his eyes. "Fine, then have the baby. Once you're better, we can have our own child, okay?" I felt like I was hearing the biggest joke. I couldn't help but look at him as if he were mentally ill. "Do you want to listen to what you're saying?" With red-rimmed eyes, he made a final concession. Sophia, for you, I can acknowledge this child. At that moment, a low chuckle came from a distance. It was William. He loosened the top button of his shirt, and with a lazy sneer, he said, "You want my child to call you Dad? Lucas, do you even deserve that?" In an instant, the atmosphere became tense. The moment Lucas saw William, it was as if his reverse scale had been touched, and he charged at him like a madman. "William. It's you." Unfortunately, he couldn't tear into William as he had hoped and was stopped by the bodyguards in the villa. He probably forgot whose home this really was. Lucas's eyes were bloodshot as he tried to break free from the bodyguards and confront William. But reality was harsh. With a casual flick, the bodyguards sent him crashing to the floor. Meanwhile, William sat cross-legged on the sofa, expressionless, watching him with a face as cold as frost and snow. "Do you want to leave on your own, or should I have someone throw you out?" I was somewhat surprised. Although William had a noble status, he was usually praised for his composure. Even when facing business rivals, I had never seen him lose his temper and humiliate anyone. This was the first time I had seen him so angry. Lucas had come alone, and even if he was reluctant, it was futile. His face was dejected as he staggered to his feet and handed a box to me. I didn't open it. The blue velvet box told me what it likely contained. It was the necklace Emily had stolen from me, the one I had longed for. He lowered his head and said, "Sophia, on the day of the auction, I didn't really mean to take something you liked. I just wanted to make you jealous and coax you into softening up to me. I got the necklace back for you, and I'll make Emily get rid of the baby. You like this necklace so much, right? Let's reconcile, shall we?" Yes, I had once loved it so much. He clearly knew that, yet still helped Emily use it to slap my face. He also knew that every time I had cried and complained to him, I had been heartbroken, yet he repeatedly hurt me. I replied indifferently, "I don't like it anymore. Neither the necklace nor you." I no longer liked either. Lucas's face turned pale. "Sophia, please stop being stubborn. Do you really want to separate from me?" I found it laughable. It was clearly he who had inflicted the deepest wounds. How could he now play the victim? I looked at his reddened eyes, pulled the corner of my shirt from his hand, and said earnestly, "Lucas, you destroyed all of this with your own hands. If we're going to separate, let's do it completely. Don't let me look down on you." 3 days later, Lucas and I completed the final property transfer at the notary's office. Lucas looked exceptionally haggard, with dark circles under his eyes, clearly having not slept well. However, whether he was doing well or poorly no longer mattered to me. At the moment we parted ways, Lucas seemed like he still wanted to say something to me. But before he could speak, Emily suddenly appeared. Her face was devoid of the gentle facade she usually wore. Instead, it was filled with anger and resentment. "Lucas. She's already carrying someone else's child. Why are you still giving her so much? I thought you were just giving her a separation fee. But why did you even transfer that villa worth 80 million to her? Have you thought about me and the baby in my belly?" I frowned slightly. Emily might not know that what Lucas had given me wasn't just a simple separation fee. Every business deal he made and every penny he earned had my share in it. Without me back then, how would he have his present? I had merely received what was rightfully mine. Moreover, Emily was being too impatient. Lucas was the kind of person whose affection was intense yet short-lived. Her act of the gentle, loving wife crumbled too quickly, which was not a good sign. "Sophia, don't think you can take advantage," Emily accused me frantically, charging at me without restraint. "Enough!" Lucas shouted, stopping her. "Are you done? Don't embarrass yourself here." Emily froze at his shout, her eyes turning red as she violently smashed her designer bag against Lucas. "Embarrass myself? How can you yell at me? You've already broken up with her, and you still want to protect her." The crowd watching grew larger. Lucas's expression became increasingly annoyed, and he finally exploded, "Even if I don't marry Sophia, I won't marry you." Emily was directly stunned by his shout. The next second, she realized something. her expression panicked as she tried to grab Lucas's hand. But Lucas, with a face of indifference, forcefully shoved her aside. "Stay away from me." That's when the unexpected happened. Emily, who loved to dress up, continued her routine even while pregnant, confidently wearing her exquisite leather high heels. She enjoyed using those to show off Lucas's affection for her. However, when Lucas pushed her away, she lost her balance and tumbled down the steps, rolling several times. She fell to the ground, her face pale as she clutched her belly in pain, crying out, "My baby! Lucas, my stomach hurts so much." Seeing this, Lucas panicked, his face turning grim. About 4 or 5 seconds later, bright red blood flowed between Emily's legs. My heart jolted at the sight. Our child, Lucas and I's child, was lost just like that. Was it fate? The unfaithful and heartless were destined to have shallow ties. Or perhaps, the baby could sense that it wasn't loved by its father while still in its mother's womb. Thus, it sorrowfully left. The world may be beautiful, but it no longer wished to come. After Emily made such a scene, my affair with William eventually reached the ears of the William family. The next day, William's grandfather summoned him back to the old residence. He specifically requested to see me. While in the car, I couldn't help but feel anxious. William reassured me that his grandfather was easy to talk to, and I believed him. However, from the moment we stepped through the door, the old man's brow never relaxed. Even though he was 80 years old and needed a cane to walk, he had an imposing presence and naturally exuded the aura of someone in power. He narrowed his eyes and, in an irrefutable tone, said, "Kneel." His authoritative voice echoed throughout the hall. Without saying a word, William took off his suit jacket and knelt upright. Even I, following behind him, felt a jolt of shock. He walked over with a kind smile. "Girl, don't be nervous. Sit down, Grandpa isn't a bad person." He walked over with a kind smile. "Girl, don't be nervous. Sit down, Grandpa isn't a bad person. I just want to help you teach this bullying grandson of mine a lesson. Just sit on the sofa and watch." I was completely bewildered as I was assisted by the William family's housekeeper to sit down. The moment William met my gaze, he slightly curled his lips, signaling me not to take offense that it seemed he was already used to kneeling and could handle it. But I had overestimated him. Because the next second, he said, "Grandpa, since Sophia is sitting, I don't need to kneel anymore, right?" He shouldn't have said anything. As soon as he opened his mouth, Grandpa William exploded. The next second, without holding back, he raised his cane and struck him on the back. "You brat. Do you still have the face to talk back? Have you forgotten the family rules? After introducing you to so many suitable matches, you wouldn't even meet any of them. And what did you do? You went and slept with a fine girl. What a disgrace to the family." As he scolded, the old man hit harder. I was stunned by the scene before me. What era was this? It was unbelievable that he was still using family discipline. William was someone who could command respect in the outside world, yet when he returned home, he had to kneel obediently and take the beating. I tried to plead for him. Grandpa William, this isn't William's fault. I drank that day and made the first move." Before I could finish, Grandpa William interrupted me. "Don't plead for him. You drank, and what about him? If he didn't have any wrong intentions, could this have happened? This brat clearly took advantage of your vulnerability. Just watch me teach him a lesson." Grandpa William was serious about punishing him. As I watched the cane come down again and again, blood began to seep through William's white shirt. I quickly intercepted the old man's cane. "You can't hit him anymore." Grandpa William refused, trying to wrest the cane back. Amid the pushing and shoving, William, who had been kneeling quietly, suddenly stood up and shielded me. "Grandpa, you can hit me, but don't push Sophia. She's pregnant." As soon as those words left his mouth, Grandpa William's hand froze in midair. After a moment of confusion, light suddenly filled his eyes. "A baby? You mean I'm going to have a great-grandchild?" William was stunned. "You called me back to get punished, and you didn't even know she was pregnant?" Grandpa William shook his head in confusion. It turned out he only knew the rough details and wasn't aware that I was already carrying William's child. When I came to the William family, I was fully prepared to discuss child custody. But after hearing the whole story, the old man directly asked me when I would hold the wedding with William. Me? Grandpa, isn't that a bit too quick of a change? I had to explain. Sorry, Grandpa William. I don't have plans to get married right now. Upon hearing this, Grandpa fell silent for a moment before glaring at William in disappointment. You brat, what have you been doing? How come you haven't even chased after your wife yet? He said this without any regard for me. I awkwardly turned my head away. But then I heard William's amused voice beside me. Yeah, it's my fault. I've been pursuing her. I'll work harder. That night, Grandpa William arranged for us to stay at the old residence. He even pretended that there weren't enough rooms to sleep in, pushing me and William into the same bedroom. The old man's intentions were written all over his face. The bedroom was decorated in a simple black and white style, clearly William's personal room. William took off his blood-stained shirt and asked me to help him apply medicine. His skin was very pale, and the bruises and wounds stood out starkly. I took the ointment and carefully applied it, my fingertips brushing against his back. His skin was a bit warm. William suddenly spoke up, his voice hoarse. Grandpa always hopes I'll get married, and he's a bit too enthusiastic, so don't take it to heart. I softly replied, to show my understanding. Elderly people always wish for their children and grandchildren to flourish. After applying the medicine, I sighed in relief. I casually looked around the room. Suddenly, a pair of cufflinks on the cabinet caught my attention. Why do they look so familiar? On impulse, I walked over, picked them up, and my heart raced in shock. William, how do you have these cufflinks? William's gaze flicked over the cufflinks, then fixed on my face. After a few seconds of silence, he slightly lowered his eyelashes. You gave them to me. I looked at him in disbelief. How could that be? I sold those cufflinks 8 years ago. William picked up the cufflinks, took a deep breath as if he had prepared himself mentally, and began to explain. 8 years ago, a girl selling things outside the university gate promoted these cufflinks to me. There are 6 blue and white diamonds in total, and the details are exquisite, not inferior to high-end luxury brands, yet she only sold them to me for $800. She said she designed these herself. They're not from a big brand and aren't worth much. She sold them to raise money to buy her boyfriend a new phone. As William spoke, he lifted his gaze and smiled self-deprecatingly. At that time, I thought she was quite pretty, just a bit silly. During that period, I often walked past that street and could always see her setting up her stall. If she hadn't had a boyfriend, I would definitely have pursued her later. She graduated, and I went abroad, thinking we would never have any more intersections. But who knew that years later, her work would appear at a global jewelry auction. Later still, she came to find me with her own jewelry brand. I watched her walk towards me step by step, and the feelings I had buried deep inside reignited. Over the years, my upbringing kept reminding me that she had someone in her heart, and I absolutely couldn't disturb her, until that night when she suddenly stumbled and fell into my arms. As night fell, the room was dimly lit with a yellow hue. The night breeze drifted through the old house's sheer curtains, bringing a gentle coolness. William's tone grew softer. That night, you kissed me first. Sophia, tell me, how could I ever let you go again? I was stunned, listening to everything. William had already cupped my face and kissed me deeply. Later, I gave birth to a cute, rosy daughter. William was always by my side, but I never agreed to his proposal. There wasn't any particular reason. It was just that I didn't want to be trapped in a relationship again. Only by truly experiencing confinement can one understand the preciousness of freedom. Besides, love and marriage have never been the same thing. I didn't dare to easily get involved. My daughter took my surname and was named Lily. I accompanied Lily from her first words to her entry into school. Unknowingly, 7 years had passed. When people talked about William, they said he had transformed from a young, handsome gay executive into a golden bachelor. William always clarified repeatedly, I'm not gay, and I'm not single, I have a girlfriend. I also have a daughter. My daughter is very beautiful. Grandpa William, still robust, would often scold him in frustration. Yes, you have a girlfriend and a daughter, but you don't have a wife. Your daughter even calls you Uncle William. Of course, Lily has known from a young age that William is her father. It's just that she is very attached to me. Every time William came over, he insisted on sleeping with me, more clingy than the child. Lily could only be coaxed away by her grandmother. So Lily would purposely call him Grandpa William. Grandpa William would come to me pitifully at night when he felt wronged by our daughter. He would hug me, kissing me again and again, his tone full of grievance. Sophia, you heartless one. When will you finally give me a title? As he gripped my waist, I lazily poked his abs. It depends on your performance tonight. It also depends on my mood tomorrow. William mumbled that I only issued him empty promises. The next second, he buried his head in, kissing me even more passionately and fervently. Later, I heard from a friend that Lucas had died. After Emily lost the child, she clung to Lucas, refusing to let go. She threatened Lucas to marry her and take care of her for the rest of her life. Lucas had long been tired of her, of course, refusing to compromise, and even wanted to fire her from the company. Desperate, Emily took advantage of her position to leak company secrets to the competition and secretly dug up numerous financial issues within the company. Lucas was overwhelmed by her antics. He first lost several major deals and eventually couldn't hold on anymore, leading to a bankruptcy crisis. He loathed Emily, and their arguments escalated. In a fit of rage, he accidentally pushed her down the stairs. Feeling hopeless and despairing, Lucas jumped down after her. After hearing all this, I casually echoed, "Is that so?" There wasn't a trace of emotion left in my heart. So many years had passed, and hearing the name Lucas now felt like something from a past life. My friend sighed, "You know, back in school, you two were great together. I remember Lucas would bring you lunch every day and tutor you. He couldn't be away from you for a day. At that time, the entire girls' dorm knew how much he loved you. What a good person, and how did he quietly fall apart later?" I listened quietly, as if I were hearing about a stranger. Mom, come play." In the distance, my daughter waved at me. William was playing frisbee with our daughter and the dog. I hurriedly hung up the phone, took the frisbee from Lily's hands, and threw it into the distance. The dog ran joyfully, and my daughter laughed happily. William looked over at me. That glance was gentle. Time was calm and peaceful. The end. Lucas's perspective. After the breakup, Lucas secretly visited Sophia 3 times. The first time was at the hospital. He was in a lot of pain from being entangled with Emily. Coupled with long-term smoking and drinking, it had completely deteriorated his health. When his stomach issues flared up, he ended up in the hospital. Whenever the pain became unbearable, Lucas would involuntarily think of Sophia. In the past, after a night of drinking, even if he furrowed his brows slightly, Sophia would worry that he wasn't feeling well. If he threw up, Sophia would be even more heartbroken. He always thought that such a loving Sophia would never leave him in this lifetime. But now, with his stomach bleeding and an excruciating pain, even just hearing her voice felt like a luxury. Sophia had long deleted him from WeChat. Fortunately, the chat history was still there. He listened almost obsessively to the voice messages she had sent him in the past. "Hubby, come pick me up after work, Mua. By the way, can you find some time this year to go to Iceland with me to see the Northern Lights? Lucas, Mr. Lucas, happy birthday. You're not allowed to work overtime tonight. And you can't complain about how ugly my cake is." Her breath seemed to still linger near his ear, playful, sweet, and sometimes angry. He deliberately ignored the later arguments, the times she cried and questioned him about whether he still loved her. Only after losing her did he realize he hadn't grown tired of Sophia. Rather, Sophia had already integrated into his very being, like oxygen, seemingly unnoticeable, but impossible to escape from. Later, by a twist of fate, he saw Sophia at the same hospital in the obstetrics and gynecology department. Sophia was there for a checkup. William was accompanying her, a well-dressed man, serving a pregnant woman while running around personally. At that moment, Lucas exerted all his strength to suppress the impulse to run up to her and plead for forgiveness. In order not to disturb her any further, he fled in embarrassment. The second time Lucas encountered Sophia was 3 years later. At that time, his company had encountered problems, and he was running around seeking funding. While passing by the huge screens in Times Square, he saw her jewelry advertisement. She was a designer with both business and artistic acumen. In these years, his career had stagnated, while she had long since left him behind. Lucas saw Sophia standing under the advertisement screen, dressed in a bright red dress, seemingly at some business event, taking photos with reporters one by one. She looked stunning. But he was already in a disheveled state, as if he could never catch up to her again. Lucas quietly felt his eyes redden. The third time he saw Sophia was at an amusement park. The sun was shining brightly that day. William held their daughter with one hand and held an umbrella for Sophia with the other. The three of them wore cute matching outfits. The little girl laughed heartily, first calling William Grandpa William. As she kept calling, she suddenly changed her words and called him Daddy. William seemed stunned, repeatedly confirming with the girl, Lily, what did you call me? Can you say it a few more times? Quickly. The little girl was a bit shy, but with Sophia's encouragement, she happily hugged William. I'm calling you Daddy. Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. What? Don't you want to be my daddy anymore? Do you want to continue being my Grandpa William? William seemed unsure of how to respond, as if he was so happy he might cry. Meanwhile, Lucas stood in an inconspicuous corner, watching this scene with jealousy. At that time, his company had long since gone bankrupt. Emily, like a malignant tumor, tortured him to the point of wishing he were dead. He was so jealous of William for being able to have Sophia. He regretted it even more. If only he hadn't been unable to resist temptation back then, he would be the one holding Sophia's hand now, and they would have children and wear matching outfits. If only there were a time machine in this world. Then he could travel back to a time before he hurt Sophia. She would still be his Sophia. Unfortunately, all of this became a fantasy. Emily came to entangle him again. This time, during an argument, Emily threw his old phone out of the window from the 10th floor. The phone shattered into pieces. Lucas went completely insane. That phone contained voice messages Sophia had sent him in the past. For all these years, he had been reluctant to delete them. On every sleepless night, he relied on those voices to quench his thirst for despair. But Emily destroyed it. In that instant, his rationality was completely consumed. He pushed Emily down. Go die, he said to Emily. He was also saying it to himself. In the moment his body was airborne, falling, the whistling wind rushed past his ears. Sophia, if I'm no longer here, will you occasionally think of me? Forget it, it's better to just forget.